So it's a broad theme in a lot of media, both written word or movies or television, that the question is not if you're going to serve something, but rather which master are you going to serve. And while this theme is present in a lot of media, I think Dylan describes it best when he's saying that you may be an ambassador to England or France, you may like to gamble, you may like to dance, you may be the heavyweight champion of the world, you may be a socialite with a long string of pearls, but you're going to have to serve somebody. Yes, indeed. You're going to have to serve somebody. Well, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve someone. And that theme was something present when I read a really amazing article on Substack by Aros. So, Aros, why don't you introduce yourself and then summarize the article that I read?
I'm Oros. I make uh, really esoteric videos on spirituality and economics, but and I write every now and then. But the story that I told in that article that I think I called my story of grief and finding God, a grief addiction and finding God. The 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 story that I have, I think, is, well, we don't really have a shortage of suffering in the modern world, albeit we honestly don't give ourselves enough kind of credit for how we're able to live relatively moral lives when no one is rewarding us for it. But my story, I grew up without any first principles. I grew up without any sense of, uh, where my where my purpose comes from, right? So my dad, when he was a young man, or when he was a boy, when he was young, he grew up in a very religious and dirt poor household where he had to hustle and work, like selling phone books and shit as a can I cuss? um,
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's fine. Do
okay,
whatever you want.
okay. Um, he had a really rough childhood, and that being the case, instead of allowing it to be a screw up, he used it to, become a pretty successful guy. And the issue, though, is he never shook his ego. He never shook, hey, maybe I'm not my end all be all, and there has to be a point to what I'm doing with my life. And so, even though he was very intelligent, I think a great leader in a lot of ways, I grew up utterly without any of what he grew up with, which was he was grew up in the Assemblies of God Church, and had a very pretty learned understanding of the Bible. And my mom, but ultimately both my parents, my mom, she was, she had her addictions, and ultimately is what led to her demise, because no one in our family would actually, there was no intervention, and there was no thing that everyone ultimately came together and said, we need to figure this out. I actually knew people, I had friends who basically had equally dysfunctional households, but because they had God, because they had some kind of shelling point, or spiritual shelling point, they were ultimately, they actually, I've seen abusive households where there was no divorce, and they figured it out. It's actually something that, God can heal these wounds in people and give them a reason, and kind of replenish them with meaning, and remind them that He's their source. But I didn't have that. My dad didn't want to do that. My mom was too, So I really, the story that I lay out is about how, my the failure of an irreligious household, trying to be well-adjusted, trying to actually, do better, or at least do as well as, a Christian household, which even, in modern times, has its own issues, you know.
Right. Yeah. It's not a
Yes.
it's not a panacea, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's odd to me, and this is just a conversation I was having with a friend just the other day. We were talking about this constant dynamic you see of moral but irreligious people from a generation or two ago who look at the world and look at dysfunction and say, why can't everyone just adopt the morality I was raised with? They say, like, oh, well, that was what we all agreed on. Like, that was the level of departure from traditional Christian morality that worked for us. But it's almost this bizarre situation where when you have departed from that lodestone, that you need to make a concrete moral claim. Like you're talking about the families you knew
Correct.
that
Claim.
had,
Yes.
right, that had even equally as bad. And I don't mean to speak to your family in particular, but had terrible situations and were able to
Mm-hmm.
reverse that due to having some type of objective moral claim on the world. But
I
sorry, carry on.
I guess I need to make it clear. I have a really rough issue with being linear.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, my story is what people need to. It's the perfect example of what happens when you have a lack of what Carl Jung called supreme meaning, right? Any lack of, and you put it perfectly, a concrete claim on spirituality, and really that's what Jesus Christ as Lord means. Is I that is my absolute truth. That's my bedrock, and so my I started using anything to get me high when I was young because I didn't have um I didn't have a like my family was so dysfunctional. We were in the just suburban rot of Houston, which is an especially awful place. And the school I went to was ghetto. I mean, extraordinarily ghetto. So I didn't really have anything that gave me a sense of purpose. My mom was an alcoholic and on different pills, and when you're an addict, you're stuck in this same sort of maturity level from when you started doing drugs. So it's pretty like my mom. So what ultimately led to this drug usage on my part, on my mom's part, my dad just being completely disinterested in the household, my sister being her insane. There was I mean, we stopped eating at the table together. We stopped just doing things together, and I would just leave and I would just go do whatever the fuck I wanted. I would go hang out with my bandmate, and just fucking smoke weed and acid, and I talk about it in the article later on. I just had this 2-month just bender on Molly, and then it got into acid and shrooms a lot, anything to just keep me activated. I did not want to be sober, and that started from before my mom died, and then when she killed herself in the delirium of being drunk and high, because she being a woman and not having a man to actually give her a purpose, right? Because a man should spiritually lead his wife, and my dad failed at that. My dad always tried to placate. He never tried to actually fix the problem, and I saw it. I mean, I was young, and I saw this is not a good dynamic, and it was almost like even at a young age, even when I was a fedora tipping atheist or whatever, there was still a fear of God within me. There was still an ultimate right and wrong that was not written by man, that wasn't Platonic, right? That, my dad always tried to reconcile, because my dad always wanted morality to be this thing of man, but it was not. And there has to be a certain point where, and it's not energy, it's not this vague dharma or this vague, Buddhist enlightenment. It's, I have to know that God loves me, and that not only that, he sacrificed himself for me, and that I am worthy of his love, and that what I do on this earth, I have an accountability at the end of my life. And it's not just, oh, I'm going to be, recycled, or it's just going to be dust, and nothing. Because if that was the case, I would have no point in my life. I would have no point to being a good person. And it's something that, I'm so blessed to have the experiences that I did to be led to where I am, because I feel like so many people, it took my mom dying for me to really realize that God loves me, and that shouldn't be how it is, but that seems to be what the modern world does to us. Is it takes a real kick in the fucking groin for people to really realize who their maker is. So, but that's really what my article is about. That's what my story is, and I mean, I got to tell you, my life from when I was 16 to who I am now at 23 is worlds different, especially in my mindset. I'm happy. I'm joyous. I'm glad. And I just didn't have that as a kid. My entire childhood was just full of emptiness and in this void that, I might bring up Jung a bit here, because Jung really has been an inspiration. But he talks about, he realized, at the age of 40 that he had everything, and yet his soul was a desert. Right? He met his soul, and it's almost like people who are vapid and don't have a point. They're just going through life trying to find short-term, dopamine rushes. And he was like, I needed to plant, a garden in the desert that was my soul.
Well,
So
it reminds me very much of the short novel *The Stranger* by Camus, right? Which is kind of a
I
like
think I know
a
that. Yeah,
textbook example of absurdism. And the reason brought it to my mind is the novel is set in French Algeria, right? So literally the desert. And what Camus writes about, and I might be wrong, this is a fairly standard reading, is essentially that outside of like a transcendent moral order, man must make his own meaning, but man cannot make his own meaning. And so the
exactly.
character who is, in a certain way, this kind of subtle, and Camus is, there's a reason that he is not normally associated with pure nihilism, right? He's an absurdist. But it is still this idea that, like, oh, there is no real moral claim. So the main character murders someone ostensibly in self-defense and is put on trial for murder, but he can't bring himself to defend himself because he essentially doesn't care. It's pointless. And so in a weird way, I'm not sure if Camus is glorifying that as kind of the absurdity of life, in which case I think that he's almost disproving his beliefs, right, by writing that.
Exactly.
But there is something where it's like that outside of that, outside of a higher moral claim of right and wrong, you're kind of left to your own devices. And it's empty and dead.
Oh, yeah. See, that's the issue with the human spirit. You can only do so much in the human spirit before you realize, like, what am I doing this for? What I mean, that's the thing that a lot of you know, the and I have a lot of friends who are perennialists and sort of pagan druids, and one thing they miss is that concrete goodness, that concrete that God isn't a watchmaker, some just guy in the background. He's in our lives and with us, and we aren't our own gods, right? See, that's that one of the most ultimate virtues that even I know atheists live by, humility. Like, it's such a basic thing. Even if you're a sociopath, you have to have humility so that you can stay grounded and not have the world see you for the self-obsessed dipshit that you are. Humility is key to getting anywhere in life. It's what Thomas Hobbes would call like that instrumental power, right? I mean, power is not just it's this power of having a position. We think of it as a position, but really it's a capacity. And what people don't realize is, well, to vainly embody humility for the sake of embodying it so you can get power. Obviously, well, we reach this constant thing that we'll reach here, which is, well, what's the point? Why do you want that? You're going to die one day. That's what people don't get. Like, you're going to die. Like, there's nothing that changes that. And it's either something that has a point to it, or it's something that you have to make up, and it changes all the time with most, paganism and most, these like sort of transcendental belief systems. There isn't a concrete, this is why you're here on Earth, which is essentially, it's a giant test and of wading and swimming through a sea of deception. That's what life really is, and trying to turn that into truth and trying to shine light into that darkness.
Well, and to speak to the more of the, and I'm not the most well-read when it comes to the perennialist or pagan traditions, right? But I've read a little bit of Nietzsche, and to me it seems like the classic answer, and this is what the absurdists would say,
That's
as
where it
well,
started.
right?
Yeah.
Is essentially, well, man must make his own meaning.
Right.
And you see that as an idea, and to a certain extent that sounds appealing, right? Like boldly striding forth to create our own moral meaning. But in application, I see very few people who can even make a going attempt at it, right? And I realized that Nietzsche's biography is it's not completely fair to bring up his own biography as a
Right.
refutation
Yeah.
for his moral
Yeah.
view of the
No.
world. But there is something to be said for the fact that the man who believed that you need to make your own moral destiny was so completely and totally besotted with women. There's a photo of him dragging a woman around like a horse dragging a cart. He had a complete and total breakdown because the man above morality couldn't bear to see a horse being beaten.
Yeah.
And it's, to me,
he was infantilized. No, that's what it is. See, being a man, it means what's the word? Prostration, falling to the ground, and it's prostrating yourself to your Lord, And so it's not saying, "Oh, I am now Lord." It's because what I noticed really about this Nietzschean mindset is they don't have an ultimate. So a lot of them a lot of what they think about is how failed Christianity is, or how failed organized religion is, and then they want to somehow think that, like, okay, there's this ultimate evil that they really hate and want to destroy, and yet their answer is to just be exactly like the evil that they want to destroy. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of them, they're very pleasure seeking. They're very, I'm in charge here. It's like, well, you just sound like someone that I don't want to be around. It's like,
well, it is an odd response. It's like, well, what's the issue? Social atomization. What's the correct way to respond to that issue? To be a better atom. ATOM, not ADAM.
Yeah. Well,
I wasn't trying to be that clever, but it is an odd it is an odd answer. And I'm by no means I've read some Nietzsche in high school the same way everyone did, and I was never particularly enamored by it. And so I'm not trying to say I know everything about Nietzsche, but that through line is very, like, present in whatever this weird circle is. So to go back to our outline a little bit, in the article, you used a phrase that I really love, where you basically say that the failure within your family started with a failure to recognize the divine. So if you could explain that a little bit, and then describe how that failure to recognize the divine led to kind of the crumbling of your family, I'd be curious to hear.
And so, even to give, I'll be very candid here. I mean, my family now, I have people on my mom's side of the family who I never met anyone on my dad's side of the family. I met my grandma on his side, his mom, once, and that was it. I have a half brother who I keep in contact with, and who was my dad's son with another woman before me. But other than that, totally disconnected from my dad's side of the family, from the literal name that I have, my last name. So it's a really weird experience. Um, Nonetheless, my mom's side of the family, it's very sparse. All the people that I used to see as a kid, I do see, you know, the most important ones, and I keep in contact. I call my grandma every Sunday. I I still I still try to stay connected to them to the best of my ability. That because they're all I have. It's like you can't give up. Um, you know, it's something that, and this will go in actually. So when I grew up, my sister and my dad, I would say, are the most sort of, and she's my half sister on my mom's side. My mom had a kid before, so both my parents had a kid, with before they got divorced and then married and had me.
Right.
But my my sister, who I did grew up with, she and my dad were both very materialistic in their beliefs. They were very much anti-religious, and I did go through that phase, but it was short lived, and still to this day, my sister is someone who is a very angry, um, just um, she didn't have a good relationship with my mom. And when my mom died, it was almost like she didn't have someone to fight with anymore. She didn't have someone
Mm.
to be angry at and to blame for her life not being the way she wanted it. And see, that's and my sister's someone who read like Ayn Rand. My sister is
Yeah.
someone who went through that phase and never got out of it. And she's just this perpetual. She's almost the ultimate Plato in that she's very of man, right? Everything
Mm.
is man. It's not and it's kind of you get back into Jungian. It's almost like she doesn't have the father figure she wanted. She didn't have the life of well-adjustedness that she wanted. But so she is very much someone who hates religion and hates God. And it's weird because atheists can't just live with the fact that God doesn't exist. They have to actively think about it and meditate on it at all times. They love to hate God. They love to hate an ultimate purpose. They're almost allergic to the idea of bringing up some sense of ethereal, even just in the idea of there being an ethereal. They only believe in the carnal, and um, I mean, shit. Even Thomas Hobbes only believed in the carnal ultimately, but he still believed in like there being a God and an ultimate purpose to things, and that's really crazy that they don't even want that. Modern day atheists, it's very much it's a war with meaning that they want to understand, and yet um, they they won't be. They don't want to accept that idea of faith. Anyway, my I grew up with a dad, in a very much in an environment of uh science worship. My dad is very much in that world of science worship, scientism. That's why I have a lot of opinions on it, because I see it everywhere. I see this worship of line go up of oh, we can basically, we love to mimic. We love it's like the hyper reality is the um it's sort of it's the mythos of the atheists. They're right. They worship their they worship their anti-culture, their consumer, the consumption. And so because that's where they derive meaning. They derive meaning from happy feelings, right? So it's like pagans. It's like and that's the thing, is atheists are basically just modern day pagans. They worship the priest class of scientists and of people in government, and you see it. I mean, they everything about their life is blabbering about how great science is and blabbering about how great man is at trying to be God. And they don't want to seek out. See, this is something that I always enjoyed, was like sort of the romance and meaning in art, and I very much grew up with, as someone, I'm very sensitive to music and movies and just a good story, and I never was able to reconcile that feeling that something greater than me. I always was obsessed with the stars and obsessed with this grand world around me that I didn't understand, and yet my dad would always stop me in my tracks, and say how there is no real ultimate meaning to it, and my sister, it's such a she's so batty and angry and unlikable. Like no one likes her. No one likes my sister. It's really crazy. Like I mean, she was one of my friends growing up. She was someone I spent a lot of time with, and just to see her rot because she doesn't want to accept that she has an ultimate purpose, because she so because she doesn't have the purpose, right? Because she's not worshiping God, and she doesn't understand, she doesn't see the divine, she doesn't want to accept that, she doesn't want to fall to her knees and plead, yell out seeking something. She doesn't want to do that because she doesn't want to be humble. I mean, people are so afraid of being humble these days because they can just comfortably go back into their pod and eat their bugs, watch their Netflix, and just check out. And I was never happy with that. I actually at a young age was very into the idea of like survivalism and going out into the woods, and I inevitably ended up doing basically that. And I mean, ultimately, that's where I found God, because I yearned to understand why I wanted to suffer, and why that pleasure seeking was so fruitless to me, and that even though I can enjoy pleasure, I wanted something that when I was done enjoying the pleasure, I could actually still be happy, and that's what atheists don't have, and that's what I didn't have, and that's why once again, the human spirit will take you so far. And that's what, my dad, once again, great guy, very polite, very wonderful. I was very blessed to have him as a dad in many circumstances, but he would never, he was, and this is something a lot of guys deal with if their dad is a boomer or Gen X or even millennial, is they, their dads are really great up until they're about 10, and then they just check out because their dad doesn't know how to relate to them anymore. And for a plethora of reasons, for my situation, it was because my dad never really grew up. He was always angry, perpetually angry at his parents. He was perpetually angry at the fact that his almost like his dad never properly represented God in the way that he should have. And so my dad, because my dad hated his dad, he hated God. And so it's almost a similar situation with my sister. And so I was always made fun of ultimately when I wanted to have something bigger than myself. Atheists truly believe that the only real meaning is derived from some guy in a lab coat telling you what reality is, some fucking headline on the internet telling you what reality is. Like, hey, do you know what what communist fucking Russia was? Like, there was literally a TV box, fucking posters everywhere telling you what truth was, and it was nothing. It was everything but the truth. Like, it doesn't jive in their fucking brains, because if they realize that their God of the man on the TV and the government and the hyper reality, if they had to take a second and actually realize, like, wait, this isn't truth, this is actually just an ocean of evil and deception, well, it would blow everything away from them. They don't realize, like, this upwards and away world of just wanting more and more pleasure. Oh, everything is getting easier, isn't that great? Oh wow, yeah. Like, it's just they can't they can't take a second to realize, like, maybe this pleasure seeking, maybe this fake world that we live in, this hyper reality, isn't really giving me any meaning.
Well,
But they can't.
it's an odd presupposition, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you see, which is that it seems to work something like this: the only thing that exists is things that can be measured, right? So it's materialism.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Yes.
step two is essentially like the people I believe about claims of kind of mechanical reality. So like where it is, how do you make electricity more efficiently? How do you make a
Yes.
car run better?
Right.
are also the same people to evaluate moral claims. So there's that kind of elision moving from claims about reality to claims about morality. And then it's kind of the third part of that messy syllogism, which is like, and if you don't agree, there's something kind of at a core level wrong with you. But it's odd because in the pattern that you see is not a different human mechanism. The way that a 12th century serf viewed their parish priest is not materially different from how the stock fedora tipping Reddit atheist views a scientist, right? Like
Yes.
realistically, they have no difference in the amount of understanding that they have
Exactly.
materially, right? Like,
Yes.
look, I think computers are quite cool. This is a conversation facilitated by computers, but realistically, I cannot explain to you how it works more by electricity than it does by angels, functionally.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
Like, at least from my
Yes.
perspective, those are
Yes.
equally valid claims from, I realize not
Yes.
literally, but from an
From your own
uneducated
perception,
perspective.
yeah. Yeah, it's magic. It's black magic, yeah.
Right, essentially. And so it's odd because that mechanism of worship is there, but it's not, in many ways, like if you take sin as the corruption of a good thing, right? Like Lewis says essentially that sin, and this is an idea Tolkien
Spot on.
expresses also, right? Like
Spot
sin,
on.
evil cannot create, it can only distort.
Yes,
And so
exactly.
that mechanism of worship, of ordering yourself in a hierarchy that is essential to be vague about it, human flourishing, has been kind of twisted from putting yourself in subservience to something greater, is now kind of turned in on yourself. And even when you look at the advances of science, quote unquote, that are so wonderful and so amazing, it's the things that make your life more comfortable and pleasurable. That is the reason science is good, because it makes my life easy. Science is good because it gave me the Uber Eats and things like that, essentially, right? Like maybe not directly, but I mean in the sense that like when you hear the benefits of science, it's, oh, I can.
Yeah. They use it to be like, oh, it allows me to be fat and eat the candy and not do anything with my time and not be happy and
Right.
just fill the hole. That's really what it is.
And it's a God that says essentially, if you like I did learn the catechism when you grew up, right? What is man's chief end? And the Christian answer is man's chief end is to glorify God. But when man's chief end rather is essentially personal pleasure, and
Yeah.
personal pleasure is treated as equal to meaning and happiness, which are three separate concepts. And it's bizarre to me because it is a rejection of external motivation conceptually, right? Like I don't need anyone else telling me what's good, what my life should be. But in reality, it's just this kind of like turning in to kind of base animalistic desires. Does that model make sense to you?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it. And no matter how intelligent you are, and no matter how morally enlightened you are, if God is not in it, it will collapse. And that's what happened to me. That's what happened to my family. And that's what will continue to happen as long as there is no glory to something greater than the self. As long as the self is too self-focused, it's like a cancer. I can't tell you. It's like my entire life was just a slow downslope throughout my childhood. It got more atomized. I got more separated from my family. I got more resentful and disdainful and self-indulgent until I found God. I would have died. I would have been dead by now, easily, easily. I can't,
Well,
dude. I can't tell you how much I loved. I mean, the feeling of certain drugs that, especially like serotonin, that tickle your serotonin receptors, like acid, Molly do. I just kept doing that stuff until like my brain was fried because. But what I realized was that happiness that almost, I mean, it's the best. It makes you feel like you're doing something with your time. It's like you'll be sitting around and listening to music for 8 hours straight, and you think that you're doing something good. Like that's what really is it's right. That's sin. It's distorting almost this creative process. Like when I write something down or when I actually do something productive in my real life, it that is that is where I should be gaining happiness from, and really, it's only in the name of God that the good things that I do, and yet when you're stuck in these drugs, you're just you're going to be checked out until you're dead, and that's why we have so many people who are like that these days. I'm just as an addictive personality is probably a heroin addict on the side of the road who's just like an inch away from death. It's just I have been made glad by the glory of God, and I know I don't want that. Like I literally, if you offered me anything other than like pipe tobacco or a glass of wine, I would say no, because it's just like I don't need that to feel the joy that I feel every waking moment of my life. And I was just as addictive as those people who all they think about is drugs, you know? So you can be made clean and renewed through the glory of God. And I'm so, I don't know, I get so bothered, really by a lot of people out there who just can't see it because, and it's funny. You know why? It's because they didn't fall as hard as I did. And I really think, dude, a lot of people these days need to hit rock bottom before they find a God. That's how selfish this country is, especially. we don't we don't have that, like, it's that natural, because we don't have community. I mean, we don't have people making us accountable. And so we need to be literally an inch from death before we're like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, God. Like, that's how bad it is.
Well, I think you're right in a way that like there's kind of a clouding to like luxury and
Mm-hmm.
personal comfort. That it's very easy, and I mean, like we're both Zoomers, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of
Basically.
yeah, we're kind of unfortunately like almost if this is an inevitability that it's very very easy to just overstimulate your senses with substance, with technology, with anything. So
Yeah.
much so that kind of the broader questions of life need to be answered can almost
Yeah.
be drowned out. And that need for there's a real need for like, quiet in contemplation, and it's very much, and this is a word that's been distorted, right? But the Greeks referred to this as leisure, right? Like time for contemplation, time for thought. And obviously, there is unproductive contemplation, there's unproductive thought.
Yeah.
But if you're kind of constantly just spinning and like whirling around, there's almost no time to realize the position you're really in. And what you said
Oh,
about
dude. Yes.
what you said about being in that kind of drug induced state of fake productivity. It
Exactly.
reminded me of, and I'm not Catholic, but I love Dante a lot. And Dante's image of, uh, and I'll have to speak delicately about this, the Sodomites, was that what the Sodomites do is they till a desert. And what they're doing is, the metaphor is not particularly subtle, right? They're doing the work and it's not fruitful, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a particularly blunt medieval example of it, right? But it is something to be said for like that, something that is attractive and pleasurable on kind of like the amygdala lizard brain level. Your brainstem is like, do this. It ticks the brain chemical boxes. It's
Mm-hmm.
serotonin, but it has
Yes.
none of the fruit, either the children of a healthy relationship or the productivity that serotonin is designed to reward.
This is
And
why. Yeah. Sorry.
carry on.
This is why I think it's not, one thing that I just recommend to everyone is like just go sit outside. I'm lucky I live in the country now. When I was in the city, I feel like sitting outside was not as glorious and calming. But where I'm at, I just like I can just walk out the door, sit outside, and just just sit there, just kind of sit there, because like that's what our ancestors did. That's what people did for a millennia, because that's just what there's not much to do right now, so I'm just gonna think, I'm gonna meditate, I'm gonna contemplate. And yet we are encumbered by nothing but noise and stuff that just tires us out. I mean, I can't, if you have a faint of heart and you're very immature, this world's gonna kill you. It's gonna beat you down until you can't take it anymore. And there's a certain point where you don't even want happiness, and this is why I try to make the distinction, because happiness, I can be happy from drinking this energy drink. Happiness is almost this is what your boomer grandma, she'll say, oh, just be happy, be happy. Boomers love to say that, and really, I mean, no, don't be happy. Happiness is awful. What you want is to be glad. What you want is a reason to be full of joy, and a reason to be. The atheists, I mean, they wouldn't want to sit outside because they feel like, oh, I'm not doing something. I'm being reminded of my own mortality. Oh no, oh no. And so you need to take. We need to start, and this is something when I was at Standing Rock, the Dapple hippie cult, basically. That was the first time in my life where I was just kind of foisted into this very natural world. I worked, and then I just kind of sat down with people, and it was like, albeit these people were crazy and very degenerate, most of them, but it was the first time where I really felt like, this is why it's good to go into Boy Scouts or something like, you need to have some kind of experience where you're away from technology, and you'll realize, like, wait, this technology shit doesn't make me happy. Like, it's just kind of, it's a cancerous thing that steals my attention, and really, it's not the thing that makes, like, you can cut this away, and I might get a little jittery, like, but I don't even get that anymore. I feel like there's such a peace in just being away from something that is so unnatural and tries to steal our attention away. Go on a hike. Seriously, just get away from this crap. It's not godly. It can be godly, and I think technology will become more communal over time, but that'll be during the decline, after the abundance and into the scarcity. But that's not the topic.
So, Oris, you talk a lot, especially in the last third of your piece, which if the audience hasn't read, I really recommend. It's very well written. But you talk about how rationality fails to provide meaning. Can you explain a little bit more of your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So. Okay. So this is if your bedrock of truth is the shifting sands of man's word, you're never going to be satisfied. You're never going to be still. You're never going to be made whole. This is something that I lived with. There's a very clear change in how I felt from before I was like 17, 18. Now, before I would say I was like, 18 years old, and afterward. And the clear defining difference was I stopped trying to, especially the last year or two, I just stopped rationalizing and getting obsessed with trying to find answers to things I don't like, that don't provide me any spiritual bread, right? I think there's a truth in the material world. It's almost like it's short term. Like, it'll give you something important you need to hear, maybe, and it'll give you a reason for something, but then 10 years later, it doesn't matter. And normally, it's a little different than you thought it was. And so what you start to realize is rationality and empiricism, this trying to find truth purely through just the material world is not, it doesn't suffice. And as a boy and a young man, like I had gone through 2 or 3 years of reading the Bible, and still I wasn't a Christian. I believed in God, and the Bible is really what led me to that concrete belief. But I still couldn't accept, like the resurrection of Jesus Christ and why He is our Lord and Savior. What I realized was that one thing I was missing was faith, because without faith, there is no concrete truth or morality. There is no structure that holds everything together. I mean, people don't even realize that government, especially the financial system, that's held on faith and not the faith of God. But there is a faith there that literally keeps everything going. Like without faith, everything would collapse. Cars would start crashing into each other. No one would give a shit anymore. There's a sense of trust, a divine trust, even without the belief in God. There is a divine trust between just man. And I think since the Enlightenment, and especially in modern times, we are overdosing on this infidelic truth, right? This truth that it cheats us and lies to us, actually. And it might make sense in the moment, but like, for instance, we spent 2 or 3 years, of believing so many lies of the government, and then it just shifts to something else, and it's almost like when you place your trust in the deception of the material world, you will be. It's like there are plenty of beautiful women out there who will destroy your life. There are cute little furry animals out there that will turn back and claw your face off. There are drugs that make you feel amazing and destroy your life. And yet, on the face of it, it all seems like, oh yeah, truth is this. There's the truth. Truth is at face value, but you dig deeper, and it's nothing but deception. And so, truth isn't in the way people think it is. It's in faith. It's in having. I know that God is there, and I know that He sacrificed Himself for me, and He loves me, and truth is in the good works you do for Him. It's not in I know this cup holds water, and that won't change. It's like, well, how do you know? I mean, everything in this world constantly deceives you. How do we know that gravity isn't just going to turn off? What's keeping all that together?
Well, to me, it reminds me, and I'm not going to just refer to Lewis 100 times in this conversation, but I might get close.
He's a good guy to refer to 100 times.
Well, he has this brief paragraph where he basically describes why human beings aren't rational. And he goes through a series of things that are almost genetically programmed into humans, right? Protecting disabled children, running towards a fire, things like that are not immediately rational, right? Like if the purpose of you is to pass on your genetic lineage, why do you run into a fire? That's a completely irrational action within that kind of bounded logic.
Even past that, why would you? We have a sense of altruism for even people not in our own in-group. This is why I hate the genetic, arguments in our own community. It's like, if there was a theater full of, Filipinos, I would still run in and save the children in there, even though they're completely genetically different from me. There's something divine there. There's love there that betrays any man-made sense of what you're meant to do here on this earth. It's like, no, it's not. Yeah, rationality will lead you to be a piece of shit. It really will. It will lead you to hate people. It will lead you to look down on people. It will lead you to be the opposite of humble. You know, it'll lead you to be the main character in There Will Be Blood. That's what it leads you to be like. If you're rational, if you think that you're your own god, that you make your own morality. Oh yeah, I'll make my own morality. I'm the one. I can go around and murder people and conquer the world. That's my morality. But I'm not going to tell anyone about it because it's mine. And I'm secretly God, and I can do whatever I want. And I'm going to go around and deceive people and try to gain this vain power. Yeah, Nietzsche. I can't stand the Nietzschean shit.
Well, right. It's a little bit difficult to make an entire society of Ubermensch, right?
Yeah.
So we're coming up on time, Aura. So if you could just get all your plugs out of the way, and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah. You can find me Ourospost.substack.com, on Twitter, OccidentalMonk1. Find me on YouTube at Ourospost. I'm really trying to do tangible things. In my newest podcast, everything I'm trying to do is about tangibility and getting young men to realize not only to be humble and accept Jesus Christ as their Lord, but to actually start creating, start a business, right? Start making money because you have a duty to basically save the human race. And the only way you do that is thinking in the long term and getting your shit together and not sitting around and whining about how evil the world is and how wrong everybody is. Yeah, hopefully we can get more events going. We can actually start forming a based network or whatever.
Well, definitely, that is an admirable goal. Thanks for your time, Oros.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks. It was fantastic. This was an awesome little show. Thank you, Jay.
Well, definitely. All right, thank you.